For joining with us with the River Shared weekly call. I'm Imanti Bandara. I'm the moderator this week. We are joining with you from Arkansas today. And so last week, Wade Burcham talked about the stream restoration alternatives to consider. So in this session, for the technical session, we are trying to talk more about it, talk more and get some questions from the people on the call and to discuss more about it. So does anyone have questions from last week or comments that we can start?
I do. There was a comment, something about California. Be careful. Remember something in California that somebody made, and I'm not familiar with that reference or what was going on there. If somebody else knows, that would be helpful.
Yeah, and Tina was the one that said that last week, and I had meant to reach out to her to kind of see the comments. If she gets back on, we may have her give a thought on what she meant by that, or it just may have just been.
I think I know what she meant. The risk of fire hazard.
Okay.
And we were talking about planting those corridors and those landscapes adjacent to those power lines. So I'm the big fire, what was that, 2 years ago, or it devastated the town that what was it called? Man, my brain this morning isn't firing.
Paradise?
Remember that big fire in California?
Yeah.
They say it was started by the power line. Yeah. That was her, I think that was her heed.
Yeah, and Lee's here, but he's off to the side. I think he said Paradise Fire, so that might be what she was talking
Yes,
about.
Paradise, that's it. Thank you, Lee.
We have a directional computer microphone.
And I guess to the conversation of just vegetation management, fuel management, and trying to get the optimal density of vegetation in our waterways and diversity, but at the same time managing fuel and fire hazard. I guess that was the connection.
Yeah.
I can share with y'all here something we got into earlier this year, and I'd mentioned grow zones that we established. It's a program 10, 15 years ago, just some creeks just not managing at all. And, there's generally a process we like to follow when, designating those areas. We look at the hydraulics, look, who's in the floodplain nearby. But we had a big ice storm back in February. Anytime it freezes here, it shuts us down for a week. But it was a pretty significant ice storm. People were without power for a week or two. It's just something Austin's not really prepared for. But one of the unintended consequences after that was just all the debris left behind. And I guess on one hand, from our biological perspective, all this wood in the creek, oh yeah, that's great. But we had a moderate storm in April and started to mobilize a lot of that, and in some of the urban suburban areas really clogged up our culverts and kind of caught us off guard. So I guess kind of for me, the thought in all this is we have to be thoughtful about how we manage our vegetation and what are the consequences. And maybe it ties to that California thing. I don't know if that was tongue in cheek or anything, but it's just acknowledging, I think even Josh or maybe even David said, or can't remember, but it's rare that there's just a zero management situation. And I guess unless you're out in the middle of nowhere, but where Wade works and where I've worked, you have utilities and infrastructure. So I was just wanting to share that story. It was on the other end, not necessarily the fire hazard, but just debris management and blocking culverts. And I guess the result was a bunch of people were flooded that normally wouldn't be. You know, they're all in the 100-year floodplain, but this might have been about a 5 to 10-year event, and the culverts clogging resulted in about 20 or 30 people being flooded in that particular situation. So something to think about. Just another, you know, if we're talking about channel management and different contexts, that's one that caught us off guard for sure. And, you know, potential for lawsuits and everything like that. And then field operations is then running all over the city, picking up every twig, you know, that kind of reactive thing. So just something to think about there too when we're talking about management of the channel systems.
So how did you guys, I mean, that sounds like you can go into that with all good intentions, like you said, and kind of with your focus on those good intentions, kind of miss something, kind of like the utilities go in with good intentions and they miss the stewardship piece. You know, same kind of mindset or behavior. What was your in general, what kind of selection criteria were your grow zones that you guys were selecting?
Yeah, and I'm not stating that this one was a grow zone, but you know,
no, right.
It was not, but it was the selection criteria generally we would need to have, you know, habitable or even, you know, functional structures in the floodplain, which, you know, is everywhere. And then if they are, at least performing an analysis to see the sensitivity of those structures to any, you know, changes in roughness and the assumed parameters in the regulatory models. But the biggest, and it's always, you know, basically, you know, buildings or roadways in the floodplain. And so that, you know, puts us mostly in parks and, you know, areas that don't have a lot of development around them. So I was blending a couple of conversations there with the grow zones, because the incident that I'd mentioned was certainly not, but it was a urban designed channel that had not been maintained. It's renaturalized, which those look great. You know, they function really well until they get clogged up with wood. But I hope that answers your question. Just basically, you know, are we doing anything in the channel that will increase the flood risk to the people that live in the floodplain adjacent to it? And we need to avoid that.
Yeah, flood risk, fire hazard. Yeah, those are real good. You know, I mean, Wade, your presentation was a really good example of coming together with the utility. You know, they're providing human services and trying to bring some stewardship practice into it. And you know, I shared a little bit just verbally, you know, with like oil and gas, trying to steer them in that direction. One popular sector where we're trying to introduce better stewardship often is in transportation. You know, most of our states, the Transportation Authority is the largest developer, and in many states that have a functioning mitigation program or are attempting to, those same developers are also the probably the largest restorers. You know, they perform more restoration in the state. And you know, one thing we're trying to move toward is, okay, offsetting losses is really good, but avoiding them is better. And so when we encourage, we're trying to bring practices that encourage these developers, for instance, to minimize and avoid impacts. But yeah, like you said, the one uncertainty is how are we affecting their original mission? So for instance, you know, Department of Transportation is taking out a dam, but there's still a bridge over the water that used to pass under. What other considerations are there? Are we, you know, our DOTs also have these stormwater and water quality opportunities. What implications are there, not just with the stream stewardship, but just in general, their own runoff. You know, does anyone have a lot of experience or something unique, like an unforeseen happenstances associated? So that's my question. Does anyone have an example, like maybe with the transportation or other sector, where we tried to introduce good stewardship or good water quality practices and found out, oh, that didn't work real good for whatever reason? It conflicted with the other mission of the utility.
I'm familiar with a wastewater treatment plant that was constructed a huge wetland, and it changed the forested area from an upland to a wetland, and the unforeseen situation was that all that upland vegetation died, and it did what you were talking about. It all ended up dying and then falling, and it just these massive accumulations in front of a culvert, which was causing some flooding, which that ended up being some effort to work on that. But that was kind of unintended consequence. A lot of the projects around here, you don't have to worry about too much fire, that sort of thing. We did consider fire in some places where we had some like pine forest we were putting in, or pine, a lot of pine trees, and we had some of the turf reinforcement mat below it, because that plastic will burn really good. And so we have done that before. Those are a couple things.
That's a good one. I like that one, Wade. The hydro period. You know, oftentimes we're like, hey, if you don't need to access or grade this, then leave those trees. You know, it's going to take us 30 years to replace that tree, you know? And so that's oftentimes our mindset, as, you know, oh, those trees are contributing, they're an important part, you know, don't get rid of them. And maybe getting rid of them is not the solution, but yeah, but who's to think, oh, wait a minute, they're going to get inundated and it's going to kill their roots and they're going to collapse, and they are going to, you know, they're going to be in the ponded area upstream of the culvert when the flood comes. So they're going to float. That's a good one. Unintended consequence there.
Hey, Josh, this is Sean with South Carolina DOT.
Hey,
I guess I don't know if this would address what you're talking about, but sometimes when, you know, in my office, we try to do the right thing environmentally. We're pushing some boundaries here. But I'll tell you, one of the things that's happened to us when we try to do what I'll call, you know, the environmentally right thing is we always have to do an analysis for cost, maintenance, use. I give the example of, we've got a program, we're trying to take culverts out and replace them with bridges. To me, that seems like a no-brainer. I can go to my third grade class and tell them, hey, is this better for Fifth Passage, a bridge over a culvert, perched culvert? Everyone says yes. But the heartache is, now I've just introduced a maintenance nightmare to our program. And so those are some of the hurdles that I myself have to look at. And I might have introduced, you know, increased bat habitat, whereas previously there was no, you know, T&E habitat. Now under the bridge, you know, there's, you know, bat habitat that if we ever want to replace it, you know, what does that look like? So those are some of the things that we have to look down the road at, unintended consequences that, you know, I never thought of, the increased maintenance costs associated. I knew increased costs to install, but the increased maintenance cost. And so those are the hurdles some of the hurdles that we're looking at, that might not necessarily be what you're talking about, but from a transportation perspective, I wanted to bring that up. Those are the little checklist items I've got to go through.
I like that one a lot. I mean, because okay, some people might say, well, hey, more bat habitat, that's good, but you're in the business of moving people safely, and that's your number one priority. And then, you know, dovetailing into all the other, you know, economic development interests of the state and so on. There's a lot of burden with transportation. That's the network. And so what's interesting about that is it presents, that's an administrative hurdle, right? I mean,
Right.
I mean, it's like we want bats, but yeah, I mean, if you got to replace bridges and then now the bats, you know, if the regulatory program isn't efficient or well supported, well resourced, I'm not suggesting anybody's shortcoming, but you know,
Right.
we all deal with those different agencies. they become a hurdle to progress. And yeah, that's a big deal. Never mind just the, like you said, the maintenance. Like, I mean, you have to have special permitting to go widen that bridge. But if you've got people down there blowing air horns during roosting season, or I don't know how you would quote unquote maintain those bridges to prevent them from becoming
Right.
bad.
And I'll tell you also, we have these, normally we get runoff off bridges through scuppers. So now that's a area that I've got to investigate now too, where I've, that first flush, if you will, what is those PAHs, those polyaromatic hydrocarbons look like? Because they're going straight into the water now. And so our water quality agency, DHEC, is like, hold on, let's look at this. This is a 303D listed already. You want to put a bridge here and you're going to push all that oil and all that right into our, so those are just some of them, my friend. I just wanted to bring that up.
I think those are good. They're completely different, like not a direct risk to human health and safety, but certainly important administrative and policy, risk. That's a good one.
Yeah, Sean, I wasn't thinking of, like, what are some of you mentioned O&M, like associated with the bridge versus a culvert? Just very conceptually, I would think a culvert requires more maintenance, just kind of managing debris and the blockage.
Yeah.
So it's not what everybody would initially think. What are, outside of, you mentioned the water quality, but I would think of roads generating that, those constituents, whether it's elevated or a culvert. What are some of the other maintenance?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I was with you too. In my head, culvert's more expensive, right? Because you got blockage and all that. But apparently, the routine in which Fed Highways has us do these inspections, and they're pretty in-depth inspections that we do. Some scour protection, some erosion at the vents. Sometimes, if it's large enough, we might have a vent in the stream, and then that causes a nightmare. We try to eliminate that the best we can. But I think at first glance, some of the Fed Highways requirements for the routine inspections is more tedious on bridges versus its culverts.
Yeah, just more detailed inspection, but maybe not the ongoing, debris management. But
yeah, I think there's a need for, riprap replacement, some paint, the preventing the beams from rusting and things like that. There's a lot of things like that that go on outside, but the full checklist, I do not know. But all I was informed of is that I've introduced a maintenance hurdle, if you will, increased cost by putting a bridge over a culvert.
yeah, in addition to capital costs. So yeah, it's generally going to be a more expensive solution. And I guess just, yeah, kind of programming, being able to monetize natural benefits is
Right.
kind of where things generally fall apart. There's work being done in that area, but if depends on whether the organization's gonna value that or not. But yeah, thanks for that.
It's kind of funny. It's like environmental services offices and DOTs all around the country are often a scapegoat for why somebody can't do something well, whether it's true or not. It almost reminds me of how, if you ask people why you don't recycle, like more times than any, people will say, I mean, nobody says because recycling's stupid. I rarely hear that. I'm the kind of guy, I carry my recyclables home on the plane with me and make sure, because I know Charlotte recycles. But the common answer is, well, I don't think the city or my jurisdiction is really recycling anyway. It's just going to the landfill anyway. And so, and so that dismissiveness is just a general, I think, societal paradigm that needs to be overcome. It's kind of funny, just that connection. Hey, I have another, for instance, we did a polishing wetland for a fossil energy plant. And it was before the NPDES discharge monitoring station. And so,
What do you mean by a polishing wetland?
So the wetland wasn't intended to clean the used water. So water's used in cooling process, and it gets contaminants and metals and all kinds of dirty stuff. And so when they're done with it, they need to clean it and discharge it back. So as a polishing feature, it was intended to not serve as the primary, but more of a secondary or tertiary level treatment. So when I say polishing, I mean not the primary treatment device. They had engineered features prior to the water entering the wetland. So it was pre-treated, it entered the wetland, and then that's where it was quote unquote polished before passing through their monitoring station, their NPDES permitted. They have to report what's going out. And it was a constructed treatment wetland is what it was titled. It was designed by Matt Huddleston and John Rogers. I'm not sure where Matt works. John Rogers is a professor at Clemson, or he was at the time. And it was a great design. And one of the engineers, Doug Mooney, he since has passed away. He put together this really elaborate operations and maintenance manual, and I got to read that, and it was really awesome to witness this. And I was like, you guys got it figured out. This is really great. You're getting clean water, almost drinkable water coming out of a fossil plant. Well, lo and behold, it only took one season of operation for it to get all mucked up. Despite the operations and maintenance manual, the pond was both dehydrated for one period of time, which affected the plants, and overhydrated for another period of time. So even though you give or develop operations in, like Sean mentioned, even if you have maintenance in place, it doesn't give you the assurance that you're not going to have problems. The maintenance might not occur timely or as intended. So the point being, I think I think the project owner was more interested in the permit, and that this polishing wetland was just a means to an ends in getting that permit, than they were interested in stewardship. So blending that stewardship with the right owner is real important. Just because it's real important that entity really embrace and understand the potential, and I think us as well, coming from the stewardship side, that we really understand them where they're at. I mean, do you really want to, do you have somebody that really cares about this wetland, that's going to make sure the hydro period is managed properly, because they had to replant the wetland a couple times, I heard, because it got devastated from bad maintenance.
And that was a regulatory requirement, that polishing feature?
I think, I don't know if it was a requirement or if it was just a eye candy, like, hey, we're doing the right thing, and that's not to say that the energy providers, the ones part of the process, they were genuinely interested, but when it boils down to it, once they got it in place, it was not in their hands. So we're turning it over to a whole different culture of that owner. While the administrative culture of getting the permit and doing the right thing was there, the operational culture was lagging. And so yeah.
Usually when we're going with betterments, with a different type of entity, they're not really set up to manage those systems. So it's usually response is, sure, we're on board if you're going to pay for it and you're going to maintain it, unless it's required, and then they're on the hook, and then they're probably going to contract that out. But I think we're all just kind of having the conversation of looking at all the boundary conditions and kind of understanding what the the long-term life cycle requirements of, and really these assets, whether it's a natural stream, modified stream, or a constructed water quality feature, whether it be a nature-based solution or not.
Well, and I think it's a matter of human values and realizing, our connection or loss of connection. I think I personally feel like if our economy embraced the value of the natural resource, which you see it does, all these companies these days, including the one I work for, we come out with programs and notebooks full of plans that say, hey, we're going to reduce our carbon footprint. And then suddenly, if we're publicly traded, our stock value leaps, and then so now we have to deliver on that. And rather than greenwash it, you got to deliver, because that monetary incentive will be lost. And I don't know, I wonder if utilities or other service providers, transportation sectors, I wonder if they could benefit from that. Hey, this is the right thing for the right reason. And if that's, if otherwise, if you're doing it otherwise, there's no longevity. I mean, it's like doing good deeds or good acts just for the sake of putting feathers in your hat or crowns and jewels in your crown, per se. It's like you have to do the good deeds and good acts for the right reason. And I don't know.
The other way, Josh, is just filthy rags and stuff, right? Hey, Josh, I think Amonte wants to redirect this back to Wade for a second because Tina's on the line. So
Yes, Tina. So we were talking about your comment from the last section last week. So Wade, you can go ahead and ask.
Yeah, there was a comment about California. We assumed that may have been with fire. I think is what we come up with, but just wanting to confirm with you that that was it, and if you had anything else to offer from those lessons learned.
Yes, wait, hold on. Can you hear me now?
yeah.
Okay, my microphone was on top of the headset. Yes, that's exactly it. I think that there should be balance. There is a necessity to keep the right of way of some utilities clear. And it was very evident when improper maintenance occurred and a forest fire that destroyed a whole town happened. So that was the comment. And, because I felt like the conversation was heading toward we should not do anything, and I don't think that that's correct. I think it should be done thoughtfully, but it does need to be done.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what we were picking off of and saying, yeah, there's got to be a thoughtful management plan for some of these projects.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was a great comment, Tina. It kind of led us on an interesting discussion about unforeseen consequences to stewardship and why is that? And yeah, a lot of that was the doing it the right way.
I was listening. I kind of got into the conversation late, but I had a similar experience where I used to work for the California Department of Transportation, and we had to I did a mitigation plan for some fill. I mean, we were doing, some highway work, and so it was in a very sensitive area. And so in order to be able to do this work, we had to do some wetland restoration. And I did a complete plan on maintenance and how it was going to do and all of this, to a point where I actually won an award from the Department of Transportation. And then I moved on and I left the state. And several years later, I went to visit the restoration area, and my heart was broken. We had set it up as like a slightly educational walkway. The placards were up, but they had not been maintained. We had set up a maintenance regime for garbage pickup. Did not happen because the city was supposed to pick it up. And everything, I mean, it kind of went wild, which I guess wasn't terrible, but everything that we had created really was just put into the earth, done, and walked away from. Maintenance was not done. And I was very sad. And, the only thing I can think is that, trying to design something that doesn't require as much maintenance and letting it just evolve into what it should be. That's my thought.
See, I think we're gonna be moving forward to the next part.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
sorry. Moving on.
That's great,
Thank you very
Jean.
much.
That's great.
Thanks for that. You really stimulated an interesting conversation.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for joining.
So we are moving on to the inspirational section of this today's call. So